Okay, I've got a few scenarios to begin with. So sound familiar. Your director is telling you that you haven't completed your annual PD. You thinking you have. She's got a pile of paperwork in her office that looks like this. So how are you going to prove that you took that course? How about this? You just finished a great PD session, but it's late and you're tired and you left with your certificate. You think you left it in your car. You can't seem to find it. And so now what do you do? And what about these? You need to locate your immunization record. At what time do I need to renew my first aid and CPR? How many early childhood credits do I really have? And what is it that we need to do to get to a higher star rating in Bright Stars? And then this, for RIDE, we want to smartly invest money in a new program for the field, but we don't have easy access to robust data on who our workforce is, what their education level is, or what their history of participation in professional development is in order to design the best support. So how do we solve this problem? Our response is that we've developed the Early Care and Education Data System, or what we call ECEDS for short. This is a system that has been designed to centralize data about the early care and education system in Rhode Island, focusing specifically on programs, program quality, the workforce, and children. This data will be used to provide meaningful and accessible and timely information to answer critical policy questions. What ECEDS is? It's an integrated data system that's integrating information that we have across our state agencies into one system. It's intended to provide the most current information on early learning providers in the state. It's also intended to streamline processes that support the early care and education community, including application submissions to DCYF, Bright Stars, and RIDE CECE. It's also intended for the workforce to be a centralized place to keep track of professional records and credentials, as well as for program administrators and educational leaders to keep track of information required for licensing and monitoring. And then it also aggregates data related to children, providers, and the workforce. What ECEDS is not? It's not a replacement for individual program data systems. It's not a system that's intended to rate, evaluate, or rank a child's performance. And it's also not a system that evaluates an early learning provider's performance. So the development of the work to answer two key policy questions, which we have written learning challenge. Many of you know our Race to the Top grant is scheduled to end December 2016. And so prior to that, we're hoping to report on several of these questions and to be able to in order to answer these. So these two questions are, what are the characteristics of the current workforce? And how many children are on track to succeed during the early childhood years at school entry and beyond? So related to the characteristics of the workforce, what we would like to know specifically is what are the turnover rates, what is the wages and compensation that we're seeing across the field, what are the levels of education across our current workforce in the state, etc. Okay, so a little bit more about the Workforce Registry. So the Workforce Registry is the individual entry point for professionals working in the field to ECEDS. So let me take a moment to pause and explain that a little bit further. So ECEDS you can think of as the broader umbrella. It's the bigger data system. The Workforce Registry is a component of that data system. And the data system has been designed so that there are several different entry points. There's one entry point for program leaders, directors, educational administrators, that is called the program portal. There's the individual professionals entry point into the data system, which is what we're calling the Workforce Registry. And all of us who are working in the field, including teacher assistants, lead teachers, administrators, technical assistance providers, trainers, even early intervention and home visitors have a place in the Workforce Registry. And then the third entry point is for statewide administrators. So those of us who are working at RIDE, DCYF, for example, to be able to look at the data that we need to. So a little bit more about the Workforce Registry. So this has been designed to keep track of professional development hours, upload transcripts that need to be submitted to DCYF or Bright Stars, for example. You can also attach specific information about courses and credentials, for example, first aid and CPR certificates, RILD certificates, Center for Early Learning Professionals, PD certificates. And so I'm going to be showing you a screen-by-screen view of this today. So before I go further, I'm just going to take a quick moment to pause and to see if anybody has questions or to see if anybody's having some any technical difficulties that I can address. So if you have a question, if you could please type it into either the question or the chat function, and I will just wait a moment or two. While you guys are writing in your questions, I will also let you know that today's webinar is being recorded. So if you have colleagues that were unable to listen today live, then we will be posting this on our Exceed Facebook page, as well as emailing a link to where you can access the recording after the fact. Okay, I don't see any questions coming in, so I will go ahead and I will continue. So you might be asking, how do you access the Workforce Registry and the ESED system? So many of you should be familiar with our Exceed webpage. To access the Workforce Registry, what you're going to do is to go to the website is exceed, exceed.ri.gov, which will bring you to this page, and you will click here on this login button. When you click on this, you'll be brought to a page which will prompt you to log in. There's a little bit of information on this page that speaks to what ESEDS is, so that, for example, if a family or a parent were to access this login button, they would understand that it's an access point for people that are working in the early care and education field. We also have a little bit of information down here below related to what ESEDS is, so you can feel free to take a look at that as well. If you've been to this site before, then what you're going to do is enter your username and password. And if you haven't, then what you can do is you can click on this Create New Account button. You'll be brought to a prompt which will ask you, are you a program administrator, family child care provider, educational lead? If you are a teacher assistant, family child care provider, lead teacher, then you would definitely want to click no. Clicking yes to this will connect program administrators to be able to have access to both the program portal and then also their own individual Workforce Registry page. So if you're a teaching staff member, you don't need access to the program portal, so you would click no, and it will then proceed to help you establish your individual Workforce Registry account. Once you log in, it will bring you to the welcome page. The site is pretty intuitive in that all of the navigation is located here along the left-hand side. So let's dive into this a little bit deeper. The first section is contact information, so it's your name, email address, date of birth. You'll see that your email address will be pre-populated from when you created your login credentials. Another important note is that this is your Workforce Registry ID number. One vision for the site in the future that we're going to talk a little bit more about is that you will be able to use your Workforce Registry ID number when registering for professional development, for example, at RIDE or at the Center for Early Learning Professionals. And then your participation in that PD will automatically be linked to your Workforce Registry account, as well as your certificate automatically being uploaded into your Workforce Registry account. So what I would recommend is that once you finish creating your Workforce Registry account is that you go ahead and make note of that Workforce Registry ID number. Down below you'll find your address information. You can go ahead and input that. You'll also notice that anything that's a required field will have this red asterisk. If it doesn't have that, it's not a required field. The next section is the biography section. Here you'll see I consider myself as, and this is a drop-down. Let me take a moment to show you what the drop-down options are. So there's a list here from administrator, teacher, teacher assistant. So you'll want to select the role that seems to fit you most appropriately based off of your function in the field. This is a fairly limited selection because these are the roles that coincide with the workforce knowledge and competencies. So you'll see it's not an exhaustive list of all of the different roles within the field, and you'll be able to input additional information related to your specific role in one of the future pages, and I'll show you that in a moment. Down below, this is the option to subscribe to a variety of different newsletters that are available in the state. Again, these are all optional, but you can select which ones you would like to participate in, or you can click this box to select all of them. When you're done inputting any information, you'll want to hit this green Save button. Now regarding this About Me box, one exciting feature of the Workforce Registry that's coming is that you will be able to generate a resume using the information that you input into this. So this About Me field you'll see is optional, but what you type in here will show up on the resume at the top. It will show up under your name, address, email, phone number, and it generally is going to be in the placement where you would have, for example, a statement about how who you see yourself as a professional, or your theory of learning, or your goals related to your work in the field. The next section is demographics. Again, your age has been automatically calculated based off of the date of birth information that you input. Here you'll want to input your gender, race, origin, primary language, and then your level of fluency is listed here. And then click Save. The next section is employment history. To add employment history, you'll click on this green button. What we're advising is that for employment history is that you include a minimum of 3 previous employers, because that will give us a several year look back ideally. We understand that some people have worked in the field for many years, and so we're not asking that people go back and they input all of their previous professional experience. It does not have to be a comprehensive list. We're just looking to see your 3 previous employers. So when you click on Add Employment, it will bring up this box. Here is where you can select to type in what your actual title is. For example, education coordinator, education specialist, floater, etc. You can type in your employer name and then, of course, address. If you're currently working in a program in the state of Rhode Island, or you're entering previous employment experience for a Rhode Island program, then the list should automatically populate based off of the first letters that you begin to type. If it's a program that you're adding experience from that's outside of the state, then you will, in fact, have to just type in the full name and be careful not to select one of the matches that might begin to narrowed down as you type letters. For example, KinderCare, there's a KinderCare in the state of Rhode Island, but there's also KinderCares outside the state, so you just want to be careful not to select the Rhode Island one if you knew that you worked in the one outside of the state. Here you'll want to put in a start date and end date. What we're advising is that you might not remember the exact month or even day that you either began your place of employment or ended. So we're asking that you just as closely approximate as you can and try to, it doesn't have to be 100% exact, but again, try to get as close as you can. Here you'll see also a drop down for reason for leaving. And then this present job button, I'd like to take a moment to talk about a little bit more. Before I do that, though, let me show you what the options are for job type as well as reason for leaving. Hold on a second, I've got to log back in. This is my own individual Workforce Registry page. So here is where we have a much more comprehensive list of the various roles and positions within the state. And so here you can select the best match as it fits based off of your experience. Related to reason for leaving, again, there are several options here which you can select based off of what fits for your experience. So I had mentioned that I would talk a little bit more about this present job button. So the exciting thing about the Workforce Registry is that when you enter your current employer and you click this box, it will communicate to your program administrator or educational lead that you have designated them as your employer. They will then be able to accept and confirm that you do in fact work for them and to pull your information over to their staff roster. So you might be asking, why would I want this or why would this be important? I had mentioned previously that the information that is in ESEDS will be able to be populated into forms that need to be submitted for DCYF, Bright Stars, or CECE. So when you click present job, it shares the information that needs to be communicated with your program administrator for one of those three applications. So it will not share all of the information that's in your Workforce Registry account because, again, it is your own individual account. It will just share the information that's needed, for example, for DCYF licensing or for a Bright Stars application or CECE certification. So we are in the process of creating and uploading a fact sheet to the Helpdesk page that will specifically outline the information that is and is not shared. I anticipate that that information will be added to the Helpdesk site fairly soon, so definitely stay tuned for that update. So let me take a moment to pause and to show you guys how it looks on the administrator's page when you've indicated that you currently work for them. So this is a test site that we have, and it's a sample of the program portal and specifically the staff roster section under staff. So when you indicate that you work for a program, you will show up here. So your Workforce Registry ID, your first name, last name, position, date of birth. So what can happen is that your program administrator can click confirm, and then you will go ahead and move down into their staff roster. Now, if you haven't yet created a Workforce Registry account, they can also go ahead and add you in by clicking this Add by Personal Information. So once you create your account, you could, and if, say, for example, you didn't click Present Employer, they can also look for you by your Workforce Registry ID number if you shared that with them as well. Now, if they add you here by clicking this option, and then you later go in and create your own Workforce Registry account, what will happen is that that information will link together so that we won't have duplicate records for you as an individual in the system. So let me take a moment and pause there and see, again, if there are any questions related to anything that I have just shared. Feel free to type that into the questions or the chat function. Okay, I don't see that there's any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and continue. So let me show you a little bit more about what happens when your information is communicated over to the this is like I said before, a sample of the program portal. So related to your specific listing on the roster, your director can enter in information about, for example, your benefits. Are you full or part-time? What are your wages and compensation? Now, something that I'd like to say related to that is you might feel a little bit nervous about somebody being able to view any wage or compensation information. Do feel affirmed that this information is going to be aggregated within the state's database. So no one working for the state will be able to see this specific information, but we will be able to pull reports, for example, on teacher assistants in the state of Rhode Island make an average of X dollars per hour. So it will be reported, within an aggregated nature. Another exciting thing is that related to your work, that your program administrator can attach you to a specific classroom. Let me show you what this looks like. So if you have a Workforce Registry account, you will show up here as available staff, and they can assign you to this specific space. They can then add related documentation, for example, lead inspection report, playground map, floor plan, an ECRS or a class report, just by clicking this select file and uploading a document similarly as you would if you were sitting at your computer. They can also attach you to a specific age group and include information about whether you're an integrated, regular, integrated, or special education classroom. Okay. Let me go back over to the Workforce Registry and we'll continue there. The next section is education history. Similarly as before, you click this green Add Education, and it will bring you to this field. So when you do this, you'll have a drop-down of degree types ranging from GED, high school diploma, CDA, associates, bachelor's, master's, and then you will also have the option to enter institution name. Now, please note that the institutions within the state of Rhode Island have already been entered into the system. So, for example, if you went to PreK or URI, you can do a match, and it will populate the variety of information, for example, city. If you went to an out-of-state institution, you will have to type in the full name of that institution and then also indicate state as well and city as well. So you can type in your major and your minor. Oops, let me go back. Your start date and your end date. Indicate if you are a Teach Scholar, your attendance status, and you can also upload a transcript. Now, to upload a transcript, I know that some people might not have access to a scanner, so there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. You can also take a picture with your smartphone and upload it that way, and you can access ESEDS in the Workforce Registry on your iPad or tablet or your smartphone. You can also log into your Institute of Higher Education and copy and paste your transcript into a Word document and save it onto your computer and then upload it from there. Your transcripts that are uploaded here do not have to be an official copy. So you might be asking, why do we need a copy of your transcripts? Well, if you're participating in Bright Stars or in CECE, this is something that they need to look at as part of your program quality applications. And a functionality of the Workforce Registry that is coming is that they will be able to do their verification of credentials and transcripts directly on the Workforce Registry. So once it's been verified, for example, by Bright Stars, it won't need to be re-verified again by a second entity or even a second time. So the vision for this entire system is that it will definitely streamline and reduce the duplication that exists in the system now across the three program quality continuum entities. So I know as we're going through these fields, it might seem like a little bit now to kind of take an initial investment in to upload this information, but once you have uploaded it, then it will just be a matter of maintaining the information, and you will be able to manage and maintain your own individual Workforce Registry account regardless of where your place of employment is. So for example, let's say that you leave your current employer in 2 or 3 years, then you can go ahead and you can designate that you are no longer employed there, add in your next employer, share your Workforce Registry account with them, and all of that information will be communicated over. Okay, another thing that I'd like to point out here is this Add Coursework button. We're asking that folks include any early childhood and related coursework that they have participated in into their Workforce Registry. You have the option of including all coursework if you would like to, even general education credits, but it's definitely not required. Now, one thing that we're currently working on is to include within the data system all of the early childhood and related approved courses, so that when you go ahead to add coursework, it will be a drop-down list similarly to some of the other fields that you've seen already. So you won't have to type in the full course name that appears on your transcript. And you might be asking, why do you have to add in coursework if the transcripts are uploaded here? Well, it's because the data system can't read, for example, a PDF or a JPEG file to be able to see what the actual content is on those documents. So to be able to pull information about, for example, how many early childhood credits lead teachers have working in community-based early childhood programs, we're asking people to include this specific information here. Okay, the next section is professional and technical credentials. Similarly to before, you click on this green button, and it will bring you to an expandable field where you can add professional and technical credentials. So here there's a drop-down for credential type, and you can select from a wide variety of options, including first aid and CPR, RILES certificates. So let me take a moment, and I will pull this up and show you a sample of what's there. So you can click the option which applies, for example, RILES certificate, and also upload a copy of your actual certificate here. For awarding entity, for example, in the case of RILES, it would be the Rhode Island Department of Education. If it were first aid or CPR, it might potentially be Red Cross, for example. And so then you can enter in your credential name, when it was issued, the expiration, awarding state, etc. Now, one thing to make note of is that at the current time, RILES is listed both under credential as well as professional development. The reason for that is that there are several different pathways for obtaining a RILES certificate. For example, some of the RILES content is embedded within a high school career and technical education program or within an Institute of Higher Education's program of study. And so in those cases, it's not considered professional development because they're not receiving specific PD approved hours. So in that instance, folks can include it here under professional and technical credential. Right now, we're leaving it up to the individual professional as to whether or not you would like to include it. You can include it in both places if you would like, credential and then also professional development hours if you want it to count for your ongoing professional development requirement. So here you can click Save. The next section is for professional development. What you can do here is to click on Add Professional Development, and it will bring this list up. Right now, the course title is a typable field, so we're asking that everyone type the course name as it appears on your professional development certificate. Now, a note to make is that very soon we will be adding approved courses from the Center for Early Learning Professionals into this field, so those will show up as a drop-down list that you can select, and we're hoping that this will make the data entry process easier for you. But in the meantime, or if you took courses prior to when the center began their approval processes, then we're asking that you go ahead and type it in here. Here you can type in the contact information, affiliation, number of hours earned, and then also completion date, and then click Save. So this information will show up over to your administrator once you've shared access to your account on a report that they can generate. So let me show this to you. This is a sample report, and so what they'll be able to do is to click on the approved PD hours here, and it will bring them to a copy of the certificates that, and backup information that you have included in your professional development page. So right now, all of these hours are cumulative, so there isn't a particular beginning or end date, so that's why you'll see some of the numbers as they are. That will also be the case for example, level of education. If you attach a transcript, they'll be able to click on this field and to pull up an actual copy of your transcript or your first aid and CPR certificate. Your BCI, for example, so they'll have kind of a dashboard that they can navigate from here. Now this little checkbox is a sample of what verification would look like. So once your transcripts have been verified, for example, it will show this icon to show that that process has been completed. Okay, let me go back here as well and show you that you can upload a copy of your Individualized Professional Development Plan. There's a link here as well that brings you to the templates that you need to do this, so you can upload and save that into your account. Okay, so a few next steps that I would like to go through. So we are expecting that everybody who's working in the field have a Workforce Registry account. All of the different entities, including DCYF, PreK, CECE, BrightStars, etc., will be further communicating the expectations around participation related to that. So we're not going to be spending time talking about that on today's webinar, but I would just say stay tuned for additional information. As I mentioned before, the information that you input into the Workforce Registry and that is shared over into the program portal will be used for what we're calling the Universal Program Application. The Universal Program Application is basically the fact that the same information is needed for submission for DCYF, BrightStars, and CECE. So that we're calling the Universal Program Application. On top of that, there's going to be addendum documents, since each of those agencies, for example, CECE, might be requiring some additional information that DCYF or BrightStars wouldn't be needing. But what can happen is, as I mentioned before, once you share your information, your administrator can generate a report, and they can use that to submit for their DCYF licensing renewal or their BrightStars requirements. So let me take a moment and I'll show you what that looks like. So in the program portal, there is a little navigation here where they can, again, select which of these applications that they would like to go ahead and generate. Now we are rolling these out. First will be a DCYF very, very soon, probably within the next week. Shortly thereafter will be BrightStars, and then again shortly thereafter will be RIDE CECE. So once they click on a report that they would like to generate, it will walk them through all of the different information that needs to either be entered or submitted. It will show the completion status as well as a checkbox for what has been fully completed. And then they can click confirm and next, and it will generate a report that can be printed. And at this time, it still has to be mailed in to each of those respective entities. But again, in the future, the vision is that it will be able to be submitted directly online. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about next steps. So I mentioned before that we're hoping that in the future that your Workforce Registry ID number will be a component of registering for professional development, and as well as your certificate being directly uploaded into your account. And then also, again, I mentioned before the verification of credentials and professional development. So an example of that is if you attend a RILE's professional development course, you would be able to register directly with your Workforce Registry ID number. It would link your participation in that course to your account. And then once it's complete, your trainer or the professional development coordinator would be able to upload your certificate right then and there. So you wouldn't have any need to get a printed paper certificate and have to scan that or submit that in any other way. Okay, so that concludes the content for today's webinar. What I would like to do is to take a moment and to see if there are any questions that I might be able to answer. So again, please feel free to type these into the chat or the questions links on your webinar feature. If you do not have any questions, then what we're asking is that folks who participated in the webinar today, if you have any other questions that come to mind, and we would also like to ask for you to pass in your feedback via this link as well. So it's a SurveyMonkey survey, again, where we're looking to collect your feedback on the helpfulness of this webinar as well as questions. The questions that you ask are helping us to populate some of the FAQs that I had mentioned previously. Now, before you guys log off, let me go ahead and show you the Helpdesk page as well. So if you are creating your accounts and run into any technical problems that you need support with or have any or questions that you'd like to find answers for, I'll show you how you can get here. So at the top of every page in the Workforce Registry is this little Help button. If you click on that, it brings you to the Help Desk. Here you can submit a Help Desk ticket. You can also receive guidance on things such as I forgot my username and password, what do I do? How is the data, what is the data security like related to the system? And let's see, if there's information that's in here that's not correct, for example, what you do. And as I mentioned before, we're continuing to add to this list, so you'll see a sample very soon of the resume report that I was mentioning earlier. You'll also find a detailed listing of, again, the information that's shared and not shared, information related to what approved early childhood and related coursework is. Another thing to stay tuned for is that in all professional development courses moving forward through both the center as well as RIDE, you'll be seeing additional information related to the Workforce Registry shared in those courses. We have instructions as well as some brochures and slides that you'll be seeing on an ongoing basis to support the field moving forward. Now, another thing to make note of is that for the time being, RIDE is moving forward with supporting the field to create their Workforce Registry accounts through webinars such as this or face-to-face professional development and TA sessions. But very soon, the Center for Early Learning Professionals will also be able to help and provide some targeted and ongoing technical assistance through the end of the Race to the Top grant for the field as well. So what we'd like to encourage you to do after today's webinar is to go ahead and begin to explore the site, become more familiar with some of the fields, pull together your transcripts and certificates and credential information, and begin to enter that into the registry. One other note that I would like to make is related to the credentialing page is that anybody who has a Rhode Island teaching certificate will at the present time need to manually input that information. That's something else that's coming down the road is that we will be having the ESED system communicating with our RIDE system to be able to do a match and to pull that information over. So that is another enhancement that we anticipate being live very soon. So definitely stay tuned for that. Okay, I don't see any questions. So again, I would like to thank you very much for your time, and feel free to again share this information once it's made available to colleagues who are not able to participate today. And I hope that this brief tutorial has been helpful.